Meet Phil. It's 10 p.m. on a Thursday, and he sits at his desk with a heating pad draped over his shoulders, staring at a blinking cursor on his laptop. The throbbing in his temples is back, a familiar migraine that has been visiting him almost every day for weeks now. He rubs his neck, wondering if the tension will ever let up as his wife peeks in the doorway and asks, "Phil, are you coming to bed?" He forces a smile and says, "Soon, I'm just wrapping up." But they both know that's a lie. Phil is a regional director for a national marketing firm. By every external measure, Phil's doing great. He leads a high-performing team. He's consistently hitting his numbers. He earns respect from his peers. But on the inside, he feels like a fraud. Every achievement is followed by a nagging voice screaming, "You're not good enough. You got lucky. They're going to figure you out eventually." That voice has been louder lately, especially as he feels that his creative side has been stifled. Years ago, Phil was an artist, a musician who dreamed of turning his passion into a career. But life got busy, bills piled up, and he traded his guitar for spreadsheets. Now he tells himself that he made the right choice for his family, but every now and then he wonders what might have been. The stress at work has been relentless. He feels drained by long days at work, having to deal with difficult clients, navigate office politics, and mentor his team. The thing is, Phil feels responsible for everyone else's success, and when things go wrong, he shoulders the blame. The migraine started a few months back, and while he chalks it up to stress, he's beginning to wonder if his body's trying to tell him something. At home, Phil feels disconnected. His wife stopped asking if he would join them for family movie night, and his son's soccer games are just background noise on his calendar. He knows he needs to make a change, but he feels paralyzed by fear and self-doubt. Today, I'll be discussing Phil's story with Jennifer Busco, intuitive guide, energy healer, and show host of Our Beats Radio. Jennifer specializes in helping high achievers like Phil to uncover their root struggles, release limiting beliefs, and reconnect with their true selves. I'm eager to hear how Jennifer would guide Phil to break free from his patterns, to release his pain, and rediscover his creative passion that he's buried for so long. My name is Jay Abbasi, and welcome to Unstuck. Real people, real stories, real solutions. While the details are changed to protect anonymity, what you just heard is based on a true story of challenges that come up in the real world. And we discuss how to navigate these environments with practical tips to help you get unstuck and build a more fulfilling, impactful, and balanced life and career. So Jennifer, we're going to talk about Phil's story in a minute, but I want to learn more about your story. I know you're in Charlotte, North Carolina right now, but you grew up in Syracuse, New York.
I did, near you, yep.
Exactly, yeah, near me. I'm in New Jersey, so not too far. And I want to ask you to go back to your childhood a bit here, because I've heard you tell a little bit about how early on in your life you recognized some things, something that was out there that was bigger than little Jennifer. So can you take me back to a story of that, like early childhood memory of when this started to come up for you, when you started to sense something bigger than just little Jennifer?
Absolutely. So I grew up in like a very, Italian northern household, but we weren't super religious like most of the other like Italian families in my area. And so didn't really know anything about the Bible or organized religion. My mom like forgot to baptize me in sixth grade. She's like, "I forgot to baptize you. Put this dress on. We're going." I'm like, "Do you even know what's happening?" So I think she just wanted to do it because everybody else is doing it. But I remember just feeling really different than my family, because my family's like very traditional. And there's a time where I was laying on the grass in our backyard and just looking up at the clouds, thinking like, when you're little, or maybe even now, we think heaven is up, right? Which, I mean, I guess that's the way that we associate heaven, with like heaven up, hell down. And I remember just laying on the grass, like looking at the clouds and being like, is that the bottom of Jesus's Birkenstock? Like just being like really curious on heaven and what that meant. And I didn't really have any sort of tools of understanding it more deeply, if that makes
Mm.
sense. And then I have another time where I was laying in bed and I felt like angel energy over me. I was probably 7 years old. And I went downstairs. My mother was like cutting coupons at like midnight in the family room. And she's like, oh my God, Jennifer, you're ridiculous. Here, take these scissors. Help me cut the coupons. So it wasn't really fostered or supported, and almost dismissed in that way when I had that curiosity. But I actually think there's like some divinity there, because then I was able to create my own relationship to it as an adult, and not be, grew up in a certain sort of religion that I had to be in the certain box. Because I have a lot of clients and friends that when you grow up that way, sometimes it can be hard to get out of that box and sort of find your own faith or path, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I've definitely always felt a little bit different than my like traditional family in that way, like wondering about the unseen. And I've always felt it.
Well, you had that experience when you were laying on the grass and you were looking up at the sky, and there's something with nature. I feel like that does that to us, right?
100. That is for me, nature is the way that if I'm feeling low, I get up. You just can't not feel not connected to everything when you're out in nature. When you have a certain thought and then a crow flies by at the same time, or, just random stuff like that. It's just really easy to feel connected for me to something bigger when I'm in nature. And that's why for me, when I go running, it just completely changes my energy. I mean, here in Charlotte, if anybody knows Charlotte, we have the most beautiful old trees. I mean, they are so old and so tall. And I go running in those neighborhoods, and that is where I get all of my ideas, whether it's like an intuitive hit for an Instagram post, or like an aha moment about like a certain path that I should go down, but that's for me. I think everyone has sort of different tools they use to connect like that, but nature is 100% that for me.
Well, right before we were recording, we were talking about how I chose this space because it has all these open windows, right? And I was saying initially I was going to put my office in the basement. And when I was down there, I was like, this is a dungeon. I can't work from here. It's too condensed. There's not any open space. And I think there's something about space. Like when we look into just a vast amount of space in nature, it's like it opens our mind. It kind of forces us to stop thinking so much, because it's almost like this, I don't know, it blasts us away from our thoughts and into the big space that we are looking
Exactly.
at.
And I think in a really beautiful way, it makes us feel small, like understanding
Yeah.
there's so much out there. I had my girlfriend say the other day, she's like, she was just having a really horrible week in all the ways. She goes, but then I remembered we're just on a rock floating in the sky, Jennifer. And I'm like, how did that just heal me? Like, I've been using that reference in my mind for the past week, because it's just like, you're stressing out about a $30, bar tab or whatever it is, right? That whatever, like just small things that like people do to you, or traffic or whatever. And it's just like, we're on a rock floating in the sky. Like, does it really
Yeah.
matter? Does it really matter if I'm having a bad hair day? Does it matter if I gain 3 pounds? I'm on a rock floating in the sky.
Have you ever seen that old video of Carl Sagan, The Pale Blue Dot, where he
I have
breaks
not.
that down? Oh, you'd love it. So it's short. It's like 3 minutes, and it's an old video. You can even tell the old video and the audio. It's not so great of quality, but it's Carl Sagan, who this incredible scientist, and he talks about the pale blue dot, and he has this vision, this picture of Earth, and it's like from such a far distance, saying like that's where all of human history ever existed, and everything anyone's ever thought, but it's just this tiny little blue dot floating in the middle of space. It's inconsequential. It's not substantial relative to all everything around it, but we make everything out to be such a big deal. Now, in your story, because I know it then led you into music and energy recognition, energy healing. So talk to me about that journey from music to
Mhm.
energy and to being a guide and support for others.
Well, it's funny because I think we talked about purpose on our podcast when you were a guest on mine, but I think it's, a lot of times thinking about a pathway that you go down, whether it's your purpose or not, it's really going back to something that's never left you. Like the love of music has always been a part of me since my earliest memory. And again, the love of thinking about something bigger and spirituality in one way, shape, or form has always been with me. And those two are still my joys, passions, loves, and purpose. And I'm not a professional musician, but I do love music. I lead open mics, and I am the happiest when I am singing or playing the piano. So, but those have always been with me. But I think when I fell into the yoga industry here in Charlotte, which here in Charlotte, hot yoga is very big. I don't know if it's big where you are, but we go fast and hot. I mean, it is insane. And I started teaching yoga, and that was really the gateway to putting my spirituality into like a container. You can go to
Mm.
class once a day, the teacher maybe meditates, or you do a little breath work, you start to feel that little yoga buzz, and they talk about something bigger. And so I started teaching and practicing yoga, and then I started leading teacher trainings, which was super, super fulfilling to me because I just love spiritual teaching. It's just one of those things that fills me up because it's like I'm teaching something that I love. So yoga was really the gateway to this sort of, doing the work off the mat, as I say, like energy healing and healing in my sessions. There's no yoga involved. I mean, yoga can be very, very healing, but energy work can be even more powerful because you're getting into the energetics of it. You're getting into like the cellular, energy of what you're doing. And so for me, it's just pretty much like yoga, spirituality, and now moving into more of the healing work with spirituality. And then
Yeah.
also, to be honest, in my late teens, early 20s, when I was like really into music and following bands like Rusted Root around the Northeast, I was taking like mushrooms and doing these drugs that were altering my mind. And, and you can edit this out if you want. They were showing me,
No, it's
they were
fine.
showing me that, there are other dimensions in your mind and there's other places where you go. And they made me see that, oh my gosh, I'm not my thoughts. I mean, I think there are so many people still walking around this earth thinking their thoughts are them. And when you realize you can create space of that, like what a sense of freedom. And I don't, currently do drugs every single day, but I think that they can give you a reminder if you're,
Yeah.
in a safe space. And don't do drugs, America. But, I think that they can show you that there are other places and that you can see energy on some drugs. You can actually see it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to edit it out because I do find it an interesting topic. And I think there's a lot of research now that supports
Oh, plant
how,
medicine. Hmm.
right, plant medicine can actually be of support to people. Of course, I'll put the disclaimer out there, like you need to do the research yourself. For anyone listening, you need
In a
to be
safe
able to,
environment. Yes.
right, it needs to be safe for you, and you need to be careful with all of these things. But there's the work by Bernardo Kastrup, I think, is a phenomenal research. So Bernardo Kastrup was able to, well, I can't say it's his research or he's the one who spoke of it, but I've heard it from him. And he would talk about how the findings for a lot of these substances is completely different than what you would think. So you would think someone who takes mushrooms, their brain activity has increased and now they're seeing all these things. But when they have done scans on a human brain for someone who took those substances, the exact opposite happens. Their brain activity slows down, which suggests they're not in their thoughts.
Brilliant. And that makes so much sense. And that's all the work that I do is trying to listen to the whispers and not the shouts. One of my teachers said, the ego shouts and the intuition whispers. And it's so easy to hear the ego shout when you have to pay your bills and kill it at your career and raise your children and drive to football practice. And I think the real guidance comes in the whispers.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about intuition and you just brought it up here, so I have to ask you about it because it's a topic that people talk about, but it gets confusing, right?
Mhm.
Is this intuition? Is this fear? How do I listen to my intuition? How do I tap into my intuition? So how do you do it, or how do you advise others to be able to listen to that whisper more rather than be just consumed by all the thoughts and the fears?
Well, first of all, I think, meditating obviously is a great way, but a lot of us don't have time to sit in a pillow with our legs crossed, right? I mean, you just don't in everyday life. And so I think it's about understanding that our bodies are so intelligent and they're always talking to us. And that is intuition. So if you're in a conversation with somebody and you feel your shoulders shrug or your heart kind of shut down a little bit, that's your intuition telling you that maybe that relationship isn't serving you, or maybe that means you need to set a boundary, or when you get that gut feeling. So I think people think intuition is here, like that's what you learn as a yogi. It's like your sixth chakra. This is a reflection. This is like the television screen of your intuition. Your intuition can be the chills. I mean, let me tell you, when I listen to Taylor Swift, I get the chills every single time. It's like because I connect with her. It just gave me the chills when I said that. Her music serves me. It is right for me. It does everything right for me. It brings me freedom and joy, you know? And
Mm,
I think also your true emotions, so not your man-made emotions, because we know, right? Your thoughts can create emotions. You can think and think and think, and then all of a sudden you're depressed, right? But if you thought and thought and thought, maybe something that was like a positive thought, you wouldn't be depressed. And not dismissing depression because it's a real thing, but your thoughts can support emotions. But I think that your authentic emotions are your intuition. And that's what I teach in my clients and in sessions. It's like, well, how do you feel about it? I'm not, going to tell you what I think you should do, marry this guy or not. Let's support you getting into your body and noticing how you feel when you think about this pathway or this choice. And
yeah.
your emotions are part of your intuition. Your intuition's part of your higher self, and your higher self knows exactly what's best for you, for your growth, for your evolution, for your fulfillment, for your connection, for your abundance. And so
Yeah.
by dismissing it and just using logic all the time, you're sometimes creating a longer road to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember you asked me about if my daughter was a Taylor Swift fan, and I had to apologize to you because she isn't anymore. She was, but
Bad about the young kids.
right, it might change soon. I don't
Gracie
know.
Abrams. Everybody loves Olivia Rodrigo and Gracie Abrams right now.
Yeah,
All
her
the
her
girls.
new her new one is Dua Lipa.
Oh
She's
yeah,
really
she's
into
great
Dua
too.
Lipa right now.
Yeah,
Who knows though? The next song could come out and it could change. So,
true.
w- w- so tapping into the body and what I'm gathering from that, because you said not everyone has the time to meditate, but everyone can shift their awareness. Like in other words, I do this with people all the time. I ask them, okay, as you're listening to me right now, if I just asked you to pay attention to your own body as you're listening to me, can you do it? And everyone says yeah. We all have this incredible faculty to observe ourselves. So if I'm hearing you right, it's not like you have to set out this time on your calendar for 45 minutes to do all this kind of thing. It's just instead shift your awareness out of just the external into just observing yourself in situations.
Yes, and I think that the easiest way for me and what I teach even in yoga class is to get present, just notice what you notice. Like I can
Mm,
hear the dog upstairs in my apartment on the second floor walking around. I can feel my feet on the floor. I can see the ring light behind my computer. I can see, and just really noticing what you notice, whether it's inside of you or out, is such a great way to shift what you're doing. I mean, it is great if you do have a routine. So my routine is in the shower. That is and after I work out or run, I have a whole routine where I imagine the water is white light, clearing me of any energy, whether it's like a nightmare I had or just stuff from the day before. I have a whole routine of giving myself energy. If I had a lot of champagne the night before, I might give my liver some energy. I mean, you just do what you can. But if that's part of my routine. And so I think a lot of
yeah.
people driving, that can be, a way to get really
Yeah.
present. You don't want to close your eyes, but that can be a great way to slow down.
I love what you're saying, because this is associations you create, and you have the power to create any.
Mhm.
I've shared in the past in other recordings about how one of my routines is whenever I wash vegetables, it is a practice for me. I
Mm.
was, I'll be washing like a red pepper, and I go through it, and I'm completely immersed in it, and just I'm with it. My fiance might walk in and start talking to me. I might not even hear her. Like
Mhm.
I am so into
And that's
watching that. It becomes
found. Yeah.
yeah, and it's my way of kind of the way you were describing that water kind of refreshing you. It's my version of that, of where I hit the reset button every time I wash a vegetable. It just became an association for me. So you mentioned, well, you brought up in one of your videos, and I had to ask you about it. You brought up signals that will help you to recognize if you are in your ego. And in that video, you said something that was interesting, and I said I have to ask her about it. You said fear is not real. You said
Mm.
fear is not real. And
Mhm.
people listening, I'm sure, are like, wait a minute, hold on, Jennifer. My fear is very real. Right. So tell me what you meant by that. Like, what do you mean
So,
when
I
you
mean,
say something like
I
that?
struggle with that too. So, have you heard the acronym FEAR, false evidence appearing real?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I play with that every day, but I think, the how do I say this? So we are made of light and love, right? We come from heaven. And that's why when you see babies, like they're closer to God, they don't understand like stress and fear. They're just like balls of love. They cry when they need their like, diaper change or when they're hungry. But like, we come from light and love. And when we leave our bodies, we're going to go to light and love. And so I think we as humans create the fear. I mean, I'm not discounting anybody out there because I definitely live in fear often, but I think it's really, we are meant to be in a loving, loving place. And what's interesting as a healer, I can sense when people have like a lot of anxiety, like whether it's trauma or just like a lot of anxiety, like isolated in the moment, I can see that literally their energy leaves their body. Like I can feel if it's on the right or the left side of them. And what I mean by that is like we have souls and spirits and higher selves, and we came from heaven. And so when we're in such a place of immense fear, our actual energy is like, doesn't feel safe to be here, and it moves to the side. So ultimately we are meant to be in light and love, but I think that's the struggle of human, right, of being human, is that contrast. Like we're supposed to have that contrast so we can see that we're meant to be in light and love. But if you actually like picked apart, energetically a person, there were, where they came from was all love, no fear. I think that's sort of, but that doesn't mean I'm not human and I still feel fear. And the ego is just, the ego is just there to like help us put gas on our car and help save, back in the day when we had to, there were lions chasing us, right? The ego is there to help you get in the cave. But I think we tend to stick. So, we cling to the egos and let that rule our whole entire day when that's not necessarily what's wanted by the higher power.
Yeah, when it becomes the master is when it's a problem, and rather than it being something that you leverage as an effective tool, a skillful tool to be able to protect yourself and your environment, the people you care about, or it's a signal of sorts, and you have to discern the signal and not let it fuel every one of your every behavior. And one thing that's interesting in the story that I share at the top of the episode with Phil, he talks about, or we learn about how he has physical symptoms, his shoulders, neck, migraines. And I'm sure you see that in the work that you do, right? So can you talk about that connection between how something like fear, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, how
Mhm.
that affects us physically?
Yeah, so we're all made up of energy, right? And so for our physical bodies to be healthy, there needs to be energy flowing throughout the body, which I know it's kind of a simple concept, but when I learned that, I'm like, oh, that makes sense, right? Your body needs energy to flow and circulate for things to be healthy. So what happens is if I have a big stress or a fear or a childhood or adult trauma and I don't process it and let it move through me, it acts as a block somewhere in the body somatically, right? So with Phil, I felt into him and I could feel that he was storing that belief that he's not enough, that came from childhood, doesn't matter who, what, when, or where, but he has a belief that he's not enough. And when I fell into him, I could feel that he was storing it in his left shoulder, right? So
Mm.
we have to put it somewhere energetically, if that makes sense. And so that means he might have left shoulder pain because the energy is not flowing properly there, because there's sort of a block or like a ball of fear, stress, or a belief. Beliefs are huge. You are what you believe. So if you're walking around holding a belief on your shoulder that says, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, you're going to draw that into your life. And that's what I do in sessions. It's my job to feel into the client to see where they're holding it somatically, and then hopefully begin to transform it into love, process the emotions underneath it. So pretty much any physical ailment, I don't want to say any, that's very concrete, but a lot, 90% of the physical ailments that we have, there's an emotional component underneath it.
Yeah.
And that's what we do in sessions is that we're like, okay, someone's going through something now, but it's actually related to when they were 3 and their, friend took their teddy bear. I mean, it could be something that small or it could be a huge abandonment trauma, right? So I'm 35 years old. Every time I date a guy, he leaves me. I'm sick of this pattern, Jennifer. And then when I feel into it, I can feel where in the body they're holding that belief or trauma. And then we begin to process the older, original, historical emotions, doing inner child work, some hypnosis type work. I'm not a hypnotherapist, but like meditation, visualization work, and then with energy healing. And that's where the magic happens. You're hitting it from many angles.
Hmm. And in your experience, Does the physical symptoms then go away? Do they find
Very
actual?
often. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm very, like, pretty casual and open book with my clients, and a lot of them will just text me or email me the next day, and when I get that text, oh my gosh, I haven't been pain-free in 2 months on my left thigh, or my like, it's just the best feeling as a healer, and maybe that's my ego because 'cause I'm like, "Oh, validation." But it feels really good because yes, and sometimes though with this work, which I'm sure if you are working or processing emotion that's really, really old and historical, it can be hard to get rid of it. It's in your unconscious. Sometimes the next day or the day after that, they're not feeling really good. They're feeling like really sad or really anxious because that emotion you have to feel it to heal it. So to process it, it has to come up and out. If that
Hmm.
so I had a client the other day that she came and she was like, I just saw a deer like half dead on the side of the road, and she came in sobbing, crying. And what I heard was her spirit wanted to give her a reason to release old grief. Mm.
Hmm.
Right? So she was able to release the grief and sadness because of the deer she saw on the road, but actually it was her higher self trying to let her release older grief that was ready to be unstuck.
Well, it's fascinating how there is the mind body connection, and there's a lot of research recently too that's come out that really
Mhm.
supports it. I know that in my own experience, I've had lower back issues, and while yes, I could point to an incident where I lifted some weights and it's what triggered it, there were some things that happened before that that I'm sure are what made it weak or had right. And then I read all about how so much of people's back pains come from stress that they've
Mhm.
stored.
Yeah, they
So
a lot of feeling supported, and, people will say that to me, "Well, I ran 4 miles yesterday, so that's why my ankle hurts." I'm like, "There's also 5,000,000 other people in America that ran 4 miles yesterday and their ankle doesn't hurt." You get vulnerable to certain areas, and then your physical world, gives you that sort of gift of you injuring it. Does that make sense?
it makes sense. And also there are so many people that have this unfortunate experience of they have consistent physical ailments of different things. And it's to your point, it's like most people don't have that, yet you're having it. And they keep going to doctors and they keep thinking, oh, this is going to solve it. This is going to solve it. Or maybe taking this medicine or trying this way. And the problem is that they've never addressed the root issue.
Right, and no shame on them. It's just really understanding, like I was saying earlier, our bodies are so intelligent. It's like when you get in your car and you see the dashboard, and the oil light goes on. Oop, I need an oil change. Like my low back hurts. Why am I living in fear? Because that's my go-to ailment. I do think when you get to know yourself, you have your go-to ailments. Like I don't ever have migraines. My go-to ailments is like, second chakra, like low belly or low back stuff, or
Yeah.
like my ankles. And that's when I know, okay, what am I fearing? Is there fear? Is there stress? Because that's exactly where my spirit dumps my fear is there. And so getting to know too yourself and your sort of go-to places, it's like, okay, that's happening. How can I come, into a place of not fearing whatever it is that's happening in my life, or not being stressed out, or maybe I need to go walk in nature and clear my energy, or some deeper, deeper healing work.
Yeah. Well, I love the check oil light, right? Because the check oil light comes up and it's like, okay, the solution isn't just to get the light to turn off. The solution is to replace the oil. And in
Right.
this case, right, when you feel a pain in your back or your shoulder, your neck, whatever it is, it's not just to try to relieve that pain in the moment, it's to then figure out what's really going on here, what's
Yes.
behind that. So
Mhm.
so with Phil, he had that repetitive thought around I'm not
Mhm.
good enough. You brought it up, and
Yes.
imposter syndrome, which is something that is so often brought up these days. And look, you're someone, you put yourself out there, you have your radio show, you have your content. I'm sure it comes up for you, right? The
Oh,
imposter syndrome, it comes up for me all the time. How
100%.
do you work through it in the moment? Like when it comes up for you, how do you deal
I
with
think
it?
for me, my biggest struggle is a blessing and a curse. Like I do feel like I'm a pioneer in many ways because I'm doing things that are, like a non-traditional life. And I love what I do. I love every single thing I do. With my healing sessions, stuff at the radio station. But I struggle with like the not being normal. I struggle with the
Okay.
not having I don't have a financial planner because I don't have a 401k because I'm self-employed. But do I wake up every day and love what I do? And I love the connections that I make and the improvements in like just the community in Charlotte. Like I'm just heavily involved in the music community and the healing community and the yoga community. And it feels really good to be a part of something, but I do struggle with not being normal. Like, can I have this like really, really super stable life and still do what I love is one of my biggest struggles.
Mm.
So
So
I don't know
with
how I deal with it. I deal with it, but I just I deal with it because I love what I do so much that overrides
yeah.
the imposter.
So in Phil's case, for example, he has a passion for creativity, right? He was a musician, and then he how did we word in the story? It was traded his guitar for spreadsheets, right? Which is what I mean. This is stuff that people do, right? I know a
Yeah.
lot of people who've made these kind of transitions, and there's this what could have been
Yes.
feeling, right? How would you help someone like Phil who feels like they had this passion for something, they're not doing it the way they thought they would, and they're feeling disconnected with the work they do now? How could they channel that passion in a more positive way?
Well, and first of all, there are some people that love doing spreadsheets. I have a girlfriend that her passion is spreadsheets. So kudos to her because that's not me. Well, so Phil had migraines, right? So he suffered from migraines. And in this world, so not every body speaks to people in the same way, but textbook energy 101, migraines, it's interesting, are not listening to your intuition, or denial. That's what migraines are. That's
Mm,
just textbook 101. So Phil, if you're watching or whatever your real name is, that that might not be the case for him, but that's what I heard was that that was really your story was spot on in the sense of the alignment of what was happening. So a lot of times, yeah, people that have migraines, I'll say like, what are you denying? Are you in denial about something, whether it's a relationship or a job that you're not happy in, or are you being shown these whispers and not really listening to them? So I think
mm,
that definitely feels like the case for Phil. So, and what I also felt into for him was creativity is in the second chakra, which is the low belly, but also the second chakra is related to emotions. And what I
mm,
heard was if he can become more creative, he's going to feel his emotions more deeply and more joyfully. It almost feels like he's a little bit of numb in that area. So that's how the chakras work is there's a couple different components for each chakra, and if one's off, it can affect the other. So his lack of creativity is affecting his emotional health.
yeah.
So what I would say if he was in a session is just maybe not ditch the job and call Taylor Swift and tell her you want to be her like co-writer, but maybe finding like small little ways to release the creative energy. Um, and then just really teaching him, like I said, like we can't tell, I don't really believe or subscribe to telling people what to do. I like to instill them to feel into it for themselves, right? So for Phil, we'd be like, let's teach you ways to hear and feel your intuition, and then that builds trust. And that's what's the most beautiful thing is when you have an intuitive hit and then you follow it and it shows true. Like what incredible self to self trust that builds. And that brings like a sense of empowerment where he will just slowly build, in my opinion, like the strength to start to make the right choices that serve him and
Yeah.
fulfill.
And I can relate to all this personally. Not too long ago, months ago, I felt like I was in this kind of cycle of just going through the motions with my own business, and it was, it's great work. I love what I do and coaching people and making a difference in their lives one on one. But I felt like that component of creativity was missing.
Mhm,
I was
mhm,
noticing it, and I think I was probably putting it a little down because I was prioritizing all these other things. But I have to say, Jennifer, that once I let it go, I just started to let my creativity just go free. I
mhm.
felt completely different.
Yep.
Opportunities started to present themselves more. And for me, it was in writing. For me, it was in poetry. For me, it was in presenting and speaking in front of audiences that I had withheld for so long. And so I guess the takeaway here for anybody listening, and please feel free to add to this, is make sure that you are always consistently having some creative outlet.
Yes, I agree. If they're a creative person, right? Not everybody's creative, but I do think creativity, that energy is really high vibrational. I mean, it's up there, in my opinion, with joy. And they say like joy is one of the highest energies. But I would say in the world of the chakras, like the second chakra, I've had spiritual teachers call it the Neiman Marcus one, like the most expensive one, because you have this chakra, it deals with abundance, so wealth, career, relationships, emotions, and creativity. So it's like that chakra, you really want that to be in check and all the way, because if you're not being creative, that could affect how much income you're bringing in, which is crazy to think about, that it's all connected. It doesn't really make sense, you know? But energetically, you want that to be super healthy. You want to be able to feel your emotions. You want to have that creative outlet if that's something that's speaking to you, and that will affect your sense, your wealth.
Yeah. And with the emotions that you called it out in Phil's story, that he's struggling to process emotions.
Mhm.
Part of that is something that I hear all the time with people, and that is they put so much pressure on themselves. They take everything on. It's their responsibility to help everybody else. How do you work through that with people so that they can, of course, take ownership of what they need to, but
Yep.
don't inundate themselves with way too much to where it becomes overwhelming?
Well, I will say probably the two most common things that I see in sessions and clients are people want to be creative and they're not, because that's fear, right? It's scary to think about that you can actually, you know, and it might not be wealth or income related, but that you can actually be seen. It takes a lot of courage to be creative because it's never been done before. I mean, even if I'm covering a song in an open mic, you know, there might be a couple notes that are my versions. It's my variation of it, right? It's something it's a creative energy, and that can be really scary. And I think that's hard. And the other piece for like what you're speaking to is people don't like trust and surrender as much as they should, in my opinion. You know, like I always say, like, keep your side of the street clean, right? Like, try to do your healing work, try to stay empowered, try to be self aware, try to be open, and like listen to the intuitive hits. But there's also that whole other side of the street that that we're not in control of. It's something bigger. We don't know. I could be gone tomorrow. I could live until I'm 200, probably not. But there's that whole other side of the street that's the universe. It's something bigger. There's a huge, you know, plan for us, and we have to really trust and surrender and lean into that sometimes and understand that that can help us too.
Yeah, yeah. When you said something there, it triggered me to ask you about, and that is a common theme that I hear. You mentioned a few things that you hear all the time. One of the ones that I hear with nearly everybody I work with is that they are hard on themselves. They judge themselves. They are their worst critic. How would you recommend anybody listening, Phil included, to be able to be kinder to themselves?
So that's a belief, right? So when we're little, from I don't know the exact age, but 0 to 7, when we are in a situation where we are shown something, so it's not even necessarily told, right? So a parent could tell you, I love you so much, you're so loved, but then they're seeing their mother be abused by their father, right? They're not feeling that, or they're seeing their mother abandoning them before or after they say they love them, right? Like my mom forgot to pick me up at softball practice a million times, and that affected me as a child, even if she did tell me she loved me. So when you experience things as a young human, you form unconscious beliefs in you that are things such as I am not enough, I am not worthy, I am not lovable. And those are in your unconscious. Those are really hard to heal if you're not using some sort of hypnosis, hypnotherapy, or energy healing, because it's really hard to even feel into, like I said earlier, somatically where it is in the body, and then how to heal it. So a lot
Mm,
of times that inner critic is 99% of the time a belief that was outside of them, right? It was just something that they experienced as a child. I have clients that, you know, I have a client that was adopted. That had, no, I mean, was not their fault, right? But they have abandonment issues now, and they have a belief that they are not lovable because when they're, you know, when they came out of their mother, they went to a different mother. And so that's an unconscious belief at a very, very young age. That's not even when they understood words. It's energy. When you're around an energy that you're shown something about who you are, you bring that with you. I have another client where her parents loved her to death, but she had a dance teacher her whole life that was really hard on her. And
mm.
so she struggled with all of these beliefs, not even from her parents, but from her, like, her villain dance teacher that would tell her things like, you know, just belittle her and tell her she wasn't good enough. And that carried with her all the way until we started doing work on it.
Yeah. I'm going to bring back a theme what you brought up earlier about how we are not our thoughts, and the work that anyone can do in meditation and being able to be more aware will help you to recognize that you are not your thoughts. Another way to frame that is your thoughts are not yours. What I mean is, it's not like there is this little you that's typing out every thought and hitting send, and then it pops up into your head, right? And that it comes from you. What you were just describing made me think of that, which is a thought that is of yourself, a belief that you have, came from an action that you saw of your parents and others, or
Mhm.
something someone even said that
Perspective that you were shown at any age.
exactly. Exactly. So when you really slow it down and you really break that down, it becomes very clear that the thought of "I'm not good enough" or the thought that I'm no good, whatever it is not an necessarily an accurate depiction of reality. It's just something that came from earlier experiences. And if you can discern that, if you can see that for what it really is, it completely frees you from the thought.
Right. And if you do the work around it and you're self aware and you do the healing, that's how you evolve. I mean, I believe that we come into these human bodies knowing some of the lessons that we want to learn. I feel like one of my lessons was to learn how to be empowered. And guess how you learn from opposites? So I grew up in a very unempowered place, feeling very unempowered. And so as an adult, I was like, I don't want to feel this way. Right. And then I learned how to be empowered. And so a lot of times, healing or working with these beliefs can actually serve you because you can come out on the other side like a stronger person.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all a learning lesson. Everything that you're experiencing can teach you something. And so I want to ask you, Jennifer, I like to do this towards the end because it gives me an opportunity to put you in this real life scenario with Phil.
Woo.
Okay. So imagine Phil is looking for some help. He finds your work and he schedules a meeting with you one on one. And Phil tells you his story and what he's going through. And I know, because of the kind of person you are and the kind of value you bring, you wouldn't, as you said, just give him advice. You would most likely start with a question. And what would be the first question that you asked Phil to help him work through what he's going through?
My first question would say, today, right now, what is your biggest stressor? And why I ask that is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Tracy McMillan. I believe she's a hypnotherapist. And she said, when you're hysterical, it's historical, right? So if there is an emotion that you're dealing with or a stress, a lot of times it's historical. And that's just your higher self giving you the little oil light change that you're ready to work on this today and now, right? So if Phil said, my biggest stressor is I feel like I'm not enough, like I'm in this job and I just feel like I'm constantly doubting myself, then it's my job to go in energetically, emotionally, ask him the right questions, intuitively guide him to figure out the root of when this all started. And what I'm hearing is it started when he was 4. So I'm not sure what he was doing when he was 4, but that is what I'm hearing is when that belief started to form. And so then we begin to do some inner child work with whatever happened when he was 4, process the emotions around it, and then sort of grow up that belief. So his current stressor is probably related to a historical belief that is my job through energy and conversation and processing emotions to help him heal as much as he can in that moment in that session. So our systems are all different where you can't just walk around and heal everybody because your systems might go haywire because we're very comfortable carrying around the fears and the stresses and the old beliefs. I've been wearing the belief, I wore a belief for 35 years that, love is the guy's going to shut down because that's what I grew up, and it was hard for me to let go of that belief. Right. So it's like those pairs of PJs that you just don't want to throw out, but they're falling off you and have holes in them. And so that's sort of how we work. And you have to kind of peel away layer by layer with the person and their own specific healing journey and their energetic systems.
Yeah. And anybody listening, I highly recommend looking Jennifer up online, jenniferbusco.com. That's your website. And a lot of this information is right there. Anyone can book some time with you directly because I know that you're out of Charlotte, North Carolina, but anyone who's there locally, of course, you can work with in person, but you also do this work over Zoom, right?
90% of my sessions are remote. And what's crazy is in this work with energy, I actually prefer remote because you have to be neutral to channel messages. And when you're like this, like, I don't even know what size pants you wear. You know what I mean? I have no idea. I've never seen you from below the shoulders. And so there are no human judgments that are helping me. And it's a much even more clearer channel for me to work with and get energy and messages.
I love it. And Jennifer, you're so kind to also offer our audience a 20% off code. And
Yes.
so they can go to your website, jenniferbusco.com, and they can put in the code Jennifer HLG20, and that's all capital. Jennifer HLG20, and that's going to run through the end of January,
Yeah.
January 31st. So anyone can go ahead, schedule some time with you, get 20% off. And of course, I know you're very active on Instagram, so people can find you just by looking up Jennifer Busco. Or what's the your handle there? Just so I
JJ
know.
Busco.
Okay,
JJ.
JJ Busco.
Yeah. Hmm.
JJ Busco, I know you're posting all the time on Instagram too. Great stuff on there as well. Jennifer, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day, sharing your wisdom with us. This was an incredible conversation. I feel like we might have to do it again because there were so many
Yay!
other things that we could explore.
Thank you.
You gotta love Jennifer's energy. She really brings it. And I'm gonna do my best to synthesize this down into our insights and our actionable takeaways. Here are the insights. First, nature is a connector. She talked about how so many of her aha moments come from being out in nature. And I also feel that when we're out in nature, it does make us feel a bit smaller when we are in that big open space. And it also is the beauty of it forces us into connection and out of our own minds. I just think that's such a valuable insight. The second insight, you are not your thoughts. She talked about fear, the acronym, which is false evidence appearing real. And we need to be able to discern that and realize that your true self, which is based more in love and in purpose, is not what's fueling that fear. It's something else. So to be able to make that discernment within your own thoughts. Third insight, I wrote this down word for word because I loved it. Ego shouts, intuition whispers. Your ego is loud. Your ego is going to scream a lot. Fears, limiting beliefs, but intuition whispers. So you have to be able to listen to that intuition for it to be able to be something that will then fuel the actions you take. Actionable takeaways. Here we are with 3. Number 1, notice what you notice. I love the way she phrased that. Notice what you notice. Nice and simple. That could be in the formal meditation practice. It could be just something that you incorporate into a routine where when you're in the shower or when you're commuting or when you're taking a break between meetings, notice what you notice. Let that be something that you bring into your day-to-day routines. Second actionable takeaway, be mindful of physical symptoms. She referred to the analogy of the check oil light coming on. And every time there is a physical ailment, it could be that there is something stuck because energy needs to flow throughout the body. And if there is something that's stuck where you're feeling an ailment, whether that's the neck, shoulder, back, whatever it is, there could be an emotional component behind it. And that may be a limiting belief or a fear that you've held on to for a long time. Third actionable takeaway, ask yourself, what is your biggest stressor? She said, when you're hysterical, it's historical. So meaning if you have this huge disruption and something's really gripping you, there is a historical component to it. There's something that happened at a younger age that has created this kind of association for you. So do some investigation and identify what's really going on here when you're acting that hysterically. Join us in our next episode on Friday in our shorter episode. I'm going to dive deeper into the pale blue dot. I talked a little bit about that in the episode, and I want to dive deeper into the implications of that and how to help you to shift your perspective on your perceived struggles, your challenges, your issues. It's a fascinating paradox where we can see our lives as both insignificant and significant. Both can be true. And we'll dive into that on Friday. Remember, that is not on YouTube. That will just be on your listening platform of choice for podcasting. And until next time, thank you so much for listening.